About my family. My father, his entire life was centered on his store, his home, and that neighborhood. And he couldn't understand how somebody could come and tell you, okay, you got to leave. So he was basically devastated.
But it was good for us for construction because we had 10, 12 years there, you know, full employment.
In the turbulent 1960s, the popular liberal Republican governor of New York State, Nelson A. Rockefeller, decided to modernize a section of the state's capital, Albany. A new government and civic center, later called the Empire State Plaza, would house a vast office complex for the state. In 1962, Rockefeller's advisors selected a near 100-acre residential neighborhood in downtown Albany. The decision was opposed by Mayor Erastus Corning, longtime leader of the city's Democratic machine.
The purpose of the commission was to try to develop plans which were financially feasible to make Albany, the capital city of the Empire State, the most attractive capital in the nation, to spur the economy of the area, to provide new job opportunities, and to beautify the capital.
And of course we were calling it Rockefeller's Folly, and we couldn't imagine why they were going to spend all this money to set up a plaza, and they were going to take all these nice houses and relocate people or throw people out of business. There were a lot of...
My father was very upset about it, I can remember. And to them, $1 meant a lot in those days. You needed it. And they said, why is the state wasting all this money to put this up? They didn't understand that. And for that matter, I didn't understand it either, to be honest with you. But
I'm here to do my very best to prevent what I believe is a tragedy for the people of Albany. The people in the area to be seized, that has been seized by the state, are in, I'd say, rough shape. They're going to have a hard time. They've had a lot of grief already, and I think it has been a cruel thing that is done to them.
Mayor Corning went to court and got the project stopped.
The city is built, I used to say like Rome, on 7 hills. And the Cathedral Hill and Capitol Hill had a gorge in between them, which was the gorge of the Ruttenkill, long since put underground. And the neighborhoods that were on the 2 hills were, in some cases, even elegant. Brownstones, distinguished individuals living there. Down in the bottom of the Ruttenkill Gorge was more utilitarian, more shops, garages, things like that. But it was a neighborhood.
Within this gorge lay the 40-block region between Liberty and Swan Streets, selected by the commissioners. Although Governor Rockefeller told the 1974 Senate Rules Committee that the area was one of the worst slums in the United States, it was a culturally vibrant neighborhood with 350 small businesses, several churches, and a number of church-affiliated schools. Over 3,000 families, mostly of Italian or Greek ancestry, but also some of Jewish, African American, German, Polish, and French descent, lived there. An important part of the neighborhood was the farmers' market. It ran 6 days a week and attracted vendors from all over the capital region. People could buy flowers, fruits, vegetables, and live poultry from the backs of wagons and trucks in the market square.
The block I lived on contained a highly diverse number of stores, liquor store. There were 4 gin mills on the block, 2 grocery stores, cleaners, tailor shop, And it was basically the commercial area for the adjoining streets.
The area we lived in, and even a few blocks around us, was definitely not a slum area. It was all very well kept up. They were mostly owner-occupied houses, and there were families.
Moving up to the Eagle Theater, oh, that was every Saturday. Every Saturday. You would get about two or three westerns, 3 or 4 cartoons, and if you were lucky, we'd always cheer if we got the Three Stooges. And of course, the newsreel. That was a lot of film for, well, I guess 11 cents was the admission.
Phillip Street, which was Phillip and Elm. It was an Italian neighborhood. In those days, mostly Italian lived around there. We had an Italian church, St. Anthony's. And a block down the road, there was Holy Cross, which was a German church. And on Hamilton Street, you had Our Lady of the Assumption, I believe, which was a French church. So we were surrounded with churches. I forget which holiday, we had the Italian down St. Anthony's. They had a big band, the Prestige band. They had that tuba, boom, 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 boom.
I do remember when I was a kid, if it was the fall, you went there. There were grapes still lined up Madison Avenue, and you could tell who was Italian because they all made wine in the yard. All the yards connected, so it was a big process.
Well, they had the open market where vendors would come.
Saturday morning was like a big event. Friends of ours would go over, buy their live chickens. Then they sat on a stoop with my mother, you know, offer them soda or something. And my mother, we used to buy 2 chickens and used to kill them yourself. You had to clean them. Or you could order from them anything you want. It was nice. You mean Saturday was a nice Saturday morning.
At that time, our community, the Greek community, all centered around the church. And most people could walk to the church. The custom was that the women would sit on the left side facing the altar and the men would sit on the right side.
Also, we had the Greek school at the church. Well, we had 1 classroom. So after American school, as we called it, we would go Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to Greek school. And those of us who remember it and attended are very thankful. This reinforced our native, or our parents' native tongue.
My father came to this country around 1910. And I think initially he worked as most Greeks did, as busboys. In 1927, he bought this property on Hudson Avenue, and that's where his business was for all those years. He lived upstairs. When he went to work, he just walked down the stairs. It started out as a shoe repair shop. Then later on, he added dry goods. Well, that was shoe repair shop, a dry goods store, and an importing food store. He couldn't understand how somebody could come and tell you, okay, you got to leave.
A higher court ruled against Mayor Corning, and the housing authority began to tear down buildings. Construction lasted for nearly 18 years and was reputed to be one of the largest and most expensive public development projects in the country. It involved the efforts of thousands of workers to operate cranes, load trucks, install the 500,000 cubic feet of marble, and frame the towers with 304 miles of steel beams. Over 4,000 buildings were demolished to make room for the new plaza.
Well, I started down there and driving a truck for Bowl Cooley Construction. It was a joint venture, and I was there when they were tearing the buildings down and transporting all the stuff, all the old buildings that they ripped down over to the dump and back for about a year and a half. We started with Bowl when I was driving truck, and we started over on Elm Street, and we took the Cathedral School and all that, the brick and the concrete and all the stuff that would normally be in a building, and we took it over to the McCarthy Avenue dump. And when that got filled, we moved over for dumping over in Huffman Avenue. This job was right in my backyard, and it was on the highest rate. The Blue Book was a building trades book that paid a couple of dollars more an hour than going out on a road. And like I said, the people that were fortunate enough to work there made a good buck, made a good union wage.
Workers. Let's talk economics for a minute. A sergeant in 1964 or a social worker made $3,600 a year. My first job out of Siena College was $4,500 a year, and they said to me, it's the same thing the sergeants meant. They raised them both up at the same time. And if you were able-bodied, you could work on the mall as a laborer and make $13,000. Rockefeller moved his office. Traditionally, the governor's office was in the front of the Capitol, and he moved it over to the south side so he could look out the window and watch these workers, literally thousands of them working in all different directions. Massive construction.
Worked for Vermont Marble. I was a foreman for them. Vermont Marble did most of the interior marble, and around the pool area, all that marble, 30-inch square marble on the floor, all the benches.
The joke was, and I think it was true, if you needed a marble tombstone, since there was no marble left in Georgia or Vermont, you went on the waiting list because it was just a huge endeavor.
Bull Cooley rented or bought the trucks out of New York City, and they were over the load capacity empty. They held about 14 yards to 15 yards of clay, and we had a certain route that the police were on that we had to run out of and stay within the speed limits. It made the sidewalks slippery, so an operated engineer had to run the broom all day long in the dust and everything, because once that blue clay we were hauling dry, it created a lot of dust and stuff.
So we live about a block and a half away from the Empire State Plaza. Some of our walls were cracked because of the pounding. It just kept pounding and pounding. I think they must have worked a couple of shifts, so even in the evening you hear the pounding going on. And also, dust and everything else that came out of the place. It was not very pleasant living next to it during the construction phase.
But we would stand on the chain link fence, and I can remember when they were driving the steel, you would actually shake. Your whole body would just be going down Swan Street. It was just so loud, so powerful, so noisy. I never heard anything like it in my life, and I still never have.
The South Mall construction affected the lives of over 8,000 people. Relocation was especially difficult for older residents.
We lived on J Street above Swan Street, and it was announced that they would only take properties in the area up to the Swan Street was the breaking point. So my parents were like about 5 houses above Swan Street, so they were thrilled that they would not have to move. But then it was decided they needed about 5 more houses. My parents had to relocate, and my father especially, he wasn't feeling well. And he used to love to just sit on the stoop and sit on J Street, and he was going to stay there, but of course they had to move.
We didn't think much of how it was going to affect us initially, whether we were going to have to move right away. We were just taking one day at a time. For some of the older residents there, they were concerned. They were concerned.
Well, of course, when they announced that they would have to take St. Sophia's Church on Lancaster Street, that was just above Eagle Street, everyone in the church was very upset because, well, it was the only church we had known, and it wasn't like we had another church that we could go to. There was only one Orthodox church in the city. And we were used to walking to church, and you're thinking, well, if I have to move too far, how am I going to get to church?
And as far as the businessmen, like Mr. Hunter, the pharmacist, now here was a man probably, I'm going to say when this all happened, in his early 60s, a very good business, a thriving business for years. Where was he going to go? And he had a heart attack. He had a heart attack as a result of that.
Prior to tearing down a building, the state government took over the property through eminent domain. People were told that they would be given a fair value. Renters were also to be given money for relocation expenses.
The people who owned the houses and had kept them up, they weren't happy about moving, and the state wasn't offering them replacement value.
My father bought the property circa 1926, 1927. It was newly built home, all brick. The store was on the ground floor, and we lived in a flat upstairs. He paid $16,000 for the property, and in 1963 he was offered $9,200 for it. And there was absolutely no compensation for his business, nothing. All of the business owners in the neighborhood who did not own their property, they didn't get anything, no compensation at all for the fact that they lost their businesses. The only thing you got is if you decided to relocate your business, they paid for your move. Absolutely no compensation for all the goodwill you had built up over the years. And I don't think that was right.
So a lot of them had to get a lawyer, a lot of them tried to fight it themselves, get an outside assessor and try to get more money than, because they were not offering replacement values.
We didn't think in terms of protesting and saying, I protest, and walking around with a sign. I just don't feel it was in the makeup of the people who were affected by this. Not at all. Maybe they should have been. I don't know. It wouldn't have made any difference anyway. What was going to happen was going to happen, so.
And then, of course, they had a big meeting, and then they were going to go after our representatives to see if we can kill it, which we couldn't. It was done. It was Rocky's baby, and so it was going to go through.
The Empire State Plaza construction created change not just for the people, businesses, and institutions which relocated, but for those that remained in adjacent communities. Some, such as the St. Sophia's congregation, adapted. They built a beautiful new church and were able to keep most of their members. Not everyone successfully adjusted.
First Methodist Church, beautiful Gothic church, that was destroyed, and the market itself was destroyed. They took 2/3 of it, and it just moved out of the city. It went up to Manans. It's never been the same.
It killed St. Anthony's. Now, St. Anthony's used to have a tremendous congregation.
If you were telling you went to Cathedral, when the Cathedral school closed, I mean, everybody moved out after that, and you had to. There was nowhere to go to school.
Eagle was gone. Closest theaters used to be the Leland and the Strand, and they went out of business eventually.
162 Western Avenue was the last building standing on the block. He was the last holdout. He refused to leave, basically, until he basically had to.
They took these buildings, destroyed them, eliminated them, so there was more pressure on the neighborhood in terms of providing housing.
The whole family moved to, not Moore Street, Myrtle Avenue. They rented, it was a two-family house. They rented the upper flat. Shortly thereafter, he went to work for the city in the park, the old men in the park, that kind of thing. He was, at that time, he was 71. And as I said, his health started to deteriorate almost immediately. And again, I have there's no proof that it was related to the fact that he lost basically his life. And his health got worse and worse, and He passed away about 2 years later.
As once close-knit ethnic communities were scattered, fires, labor issues, and other construction problems plagued the Empire State Plaza project. By the mid-1970s, the new mall was several years behind schedule and estimated to be at least $500 million over budget with interest. Communities increasingly turned to collective action to combat the destruction of their neighborhoods brought by urban renewal. Groups like the Center Square Association and the Historic Albany Foundation organized to defeat plans to run a major highway through downtown Albany.
We were very much concerned about the highway coming through because what they proposed to do was to have the traffic coming into the Empire State Plaza exit going west. They would take down the south side of J Street and the north side of Hudson and have an open highway going to Washington Park. They would put a highway under Washington Park going north and south to connect to the other highways. And ultimately, because of the concern of the neighbors, and I think also because of lack of funding, that project was dropped.
While the Empire State Plaza gave Albany one of the largest legislative and cultural centers in the United States, it came at great human and material cost. The destruction which it brought to one 40-block neighborhood fostered the growth in local associations interested in preventing similar disruption to their communities.
I think there's a lot of good memories about the mall when you're dealing with the fireworks on the 4th of July, but after that, it just doesn't function to bring a people together. It's imposed on the city, and it's a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday Wall Street type of environment.
To me, it's just representative of the era of institutions in our society becoming massive organizations of administration.
Partly it is an attraction for tourists. I'd like to think it's an attraction for the tourists. And it's good for the city, it's good for the downtown area.
But we liked the mall, the buildings, what they did, and how beautiful it looked. But that was the end result. But people still didn't feel that they should have taken their house in order to get this beautiful complex.
It probably is overall beneficial to the city. It's just that they should have treated well, I can only speak for my family, they should have been a little fairer, shall we say. I mean, progress, in some sense it's progress.